Hello history lovers and welcome back to my channel. Today we'll continue our deep dive into the captivating life of Anne Boleyn, a name forever etched into the pages of English history. If you're new here, hi, my name is Hannah and I do my best with really bad pronunciation to give you a new insight into history. If you haven't already, make sure you're subscribed and that you hit that notification bell to be alerted of when a new video goes live. And without further ado, let's get into the video. Our journey continues in February 1522 when Thomas Boleyn, Anne's father, skillfully secured her a coveted position in the household of Queen Catherine of Aragon. By March 1522, Anne was officially integrated into the royal wardrobe and soon elevated to the esteemed role of a maid of honour to Queen Catherine. It wouldn't be long till Anne made herself noticed. There were presented to the eye of the court the rare and admirable beauty of the fresh and young Lady Anne Boleyn to be attending on the Queen. The 4th of March 1522 bore witness to a grand feast hosted by the influential Cardinal Wolsey at his London home, York Place, for the King and Queen. Both Anne and her sister Mary graced the occasion, and this event initiated Anne's ascent to prominence within the royal court. The assault on the Castle of Virtue, most commonly referred to as Château Vert, a large model of a castle called Le Château Vert, was wheeled into the hall, and if you haven't guessed it, yes, it was indeed green. 5 ladies and 5 gentlemen came from the castle and they danced together. Mary Boleyn played kindness, Mary Tudor was beauty, Catherine of York, Countess of Devon, was honour, Jane Parker, later Boleyn, was constancy, and rather fittingly, Anne Boleyn was perseverance. Anne would find plenty of situations in her life where she would have to persevere, although ironically, she would never dream of it at this time. All the women wore white satin gowns embroidered with gold thread. King Henry VIII had his eyes fixed on Lady Boleyn, but not Anne. It was her sister and his mistress, Mary. Not that I think Anne minded, as she was eyeing up Henry Percy, who was also in the audience. A match with Percy would have been advantageous for her, but a downgrade for him. This suggests that, on his part anyway, this was a love match. Although Anne's hatred towards Wolsey for eventually breaking off the relationship may suggest that it was also a love match for Anne as well.
I hate you like I care.
By the summer of 1523, Henry Percy, the heir to the earldom of Northumberland, had secretly proposed to Anne. The prospect of becoming the Countess of Northumberland and overseeing Alnwick Castle filled her with delight. Their secret engagement likely developed in 1523, as Percy had been stationed in the north as Warden of the East and Middle Marches since late 1522 to early 1523. However, this passionate affair faced a swift and decisive intervention. Cardinal Wolsey, aware of the budding relationship, recognised its illegitimacy, given Percy's prior betrothal to Lady Mary Talbot, dating back to 1516. In those times, a pre-contract was as binding as a marriage. Wolsey promptly informed the king, who, interestingly, revealed his own affections for Anne.
Coincidence? I think not!
The love between Anne and Percy could not have endured for long, as Wolsey likely intervened during the late summer of 1523. Although the young couple ardently desired marriage, Percy was honour-bound to Lady Mary Talbot. His father was summoned to convince him to honour the existing betrothal, which had been formally arranged by September 1523. Anne, understandably consumed by resentment towards Wolsey, suffered a humiliating fall from grace and was sent home to Hever in disgrace. 1525 is the year that historians tend to believe that King Henry VIII started to pursue Anne Boleyn. She was now back at court, serving Queen Catherine, having recovered from the Percy scandal. Her sister Mary may or may not have used what little influence she had with the king while she was his mistress, although that was most likely over by this point. It's interesting to note that after Butler and Percy, the latter of which was wrapped up by 1523, her father Sir Thomas Boleyn had made no effort to find Anne a suitor, and that 2 years later in 1525, she is still single and available.
Wait a tick. That means I'm single again! Oh, behave! Yeah!
Maybe he was waiting for a valuable prize for his daughter, who knows. In early 1527, Henry proposed marriage to Anne, who sought to reassure him that Thomas Wyatt held no significance in her affections. She explained that the incident with the trinket had occurred without her consent. Anne, however, found herself grappling with the intensity of Henry's passion, particularly as he had become increasingly open with his flirtations. As a result, she fled from the royal court and retreated to Hever Castle. Ironically, this move seemed to make Henry want her more. As late spring arrived in 1527, Anne eventually accepted the king's proposal for marriage, fearing that she might lose his interest. As soon as he became available, Henry paid a visit to Anne at Hever Castle, where she initially agreed to return to court, even considering the company of her mother to safeguard her reputation. However, as Henry left, Anne had a change of heart and sent a message to Henry expressing her inability to return. This decision caused Henry some anxiety, fearing that Anne's feelings might have cooled. In his next letter, he complained about her not writing to him enough. After much pleading from Henry, Anne eventually returned to court, driven by her fear of losing his interest. Upon her return, Henry made no effort to conceal their romantic involvement. Instead, he openly showered her with gifts, including jewellery and luxurious clothing. Around this time, Cardinal Wolsey sensed the emergence of a hostile faction around Anne, although he had seemingly forgotten about the Percy affair and regarded Anne, much like Catherine, as just another of the king's mistresses who would fade away with time. But Anne had not forgotten. She was determined to orchestrate Wolsey's downfall. But first, she needed his assistance in negotiating the annulment of Henry's first marriage. While Anne maintained a cordial facade towards Wolsey and continued to participate in various court activities alongside the king, Anne was constantly in the king's company. She ate with him, prayed with him, and danced with him, but she would not share a bed with him. Many believed that Anne was responsible for sowing seeds of doubt in Henry's marriage, yet she served as more of a catalyst than the primary cause of his marital concerns. Anne was rarely seen at court between May 1527 and summer 1529. On the 22nd of June 1527, a significant moment unfolded as Henry paid a visit to Catherine's apartments to formally announce his decision to seek an annulment of their marriage. Although Catherine had already gathered this information through her network of informants, the confirmation of his intent shattered her peace of mind and her opinion of the Lady Anne. Henry asked for Catherine's cooperation and offered her the option to choose a residence for her retirement. She wept and firmly rejected Henry's proposal, carrying on as though nothing had happened between them. During the following month, July 1527, Cardinal Wolsey embarked on a diplomatic mission to France with the dual purpose of securing support for the annulment and the potential for a French alliance. Unfortunately for Wolsey, he failed on all accounts. While he was away, Anne and her faction, supposedly, manipulated Henry into believing that Wolsey was actively working to get the Pope to reject the annulment. Wolsey returned home, empty-handed, which only fueled the rumours spread by Anne and her faction about his true intentions. Now, I'm not sure what happened between Mary Tudor and Anne Boleyn, but according to Alison Weir in her book The Six Wives of Henry VIII, Dowager Queen of France Mary Tudor supported Queen Catherine, of whom she was very fond of, and she hated Anne Boleyn. So much so, she refused to come to court while she was there. Now, to me, this seems odd, considering that 13 years earlier, Mary had specifically asked for Anne to accompany her to France. Although, 13 years is a very long time, and a lot can happen. It could just be that she has a better bond with Catherine, as Mary would have known her since 1501, and in a Taylor Swift Katy Perry fashion, she watched this go down and picked sides. Anne, who was at Hever, made a brief court appearance before returning to Hever for most of the winter. Henry and Anne exchanged gifts that New Year's Eve. Her gift to him was a jewelled ship, in which the solitary damsel is tossed about. On the 1st of January 1528, the dispensation for Henry to marry Anne was issued, although it did not specifically mention Anne. It meant that Henry, when he was free, could take any woman to be his wife, in any degree or affinity, even the first ex illicio coitio, arising from illicit intercourse, which basically meant he could marry the sister of his former mistress, which would have been seen as incestuous. That January also saw France and England make an alliance and declare war on Spain and the Holy Roman Emperor, much to the distress of the king's Spanish wife, Queen Catherine. In late May 1528, England saw the worst outbreak of the sweating sickness it had ever seen. The sweating sickness was lethal, there was no cure, and those who survived the first 24 hours could hope to live. Today, it is impossible to identify what the sweating sickness actually was, as the last case reported was in 1551. Germaphobe Henry was horrified and in a panic dismissed most of his courtiers and servants and left Greenwich Palace in London for Waltham Abbey in Essex. He took both Queen Catherine and Anne Boleyn with him. 40,000 cases were reported in London, and Waltham proved not to be the safe haven that Henry had hoped for. Anne's brother George caught the sweating sickness on around the 16th of June. He would survive. Shortly afterwards, one of Anne's maids caught the sweat, and Henry fled to Hunsdon House. He then sent Anne home to her father at Hever, as she was suspected of having been infected. Anne would succumb to the illness herself on the 22nd of June. Anne, unlike her brother-in-law William Carey, would survive. In a display of concern and affection, King Henry VIII sent his second best doctor, Dr. William Butts, to attend to Anne. But why not send Anne the best doctor? Well, that's because he saved that for himself, duh.
Pretty obvious.
But the fact that Henry was willing to risk the health of his second best doctor, who would be the best if the first died, speaks volumes about the deep significance that Anne held in his heart. It is rumoured that Anne apparently remarked that she would have died content if she had died queen, but in all honesty I do doubt that she said that. By the time Dr. Butts arrived, Anne, however, was on the mend. The king was told of the good news the next morning that both Anne and her father Thomas were past the danger and making a perfect recovery. The sweat died out by the July and Anne returned to court. However, she left Queen Catherine's service and set up her own household near Greenwich and had her own ladies-in-waiting. Anne was now queen, all but in title. There have been rumours that Anne and Henry succumbed to their desires prior to 1532. However, there is no evidence of this. Even Eustace Chapuis, who wasn't exactly a fan of Anne Boleyn, admitted that there was no proof of adultery. Flirting and 16th century version of sexting, yes, but sex, no.
Are you saying that you don't want to get with this?
The only evidence we have of Anne and Henry being intimate before marriage is when Anne becomes pregnant with Princess Elizabeth in the autumn of 1532. And this is where I'm going to leave today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. And if you haven't already, and if you really love this video and the content that I make, then why not leave a super thanks? But until the next one, have a wonderful day.